That devastating winter struck the high plains of the Colorado Territory early, unleashing razor-sharp gales and blizzards that choked the life out of livestock right where they froze. Nestled in a shadow between twin crimson canyons, the ruined McAllister property lay completely desolate, save for one lone survivor. They called her Lona. Just 17 years old, a fragile-looking phantom carrying a ghostly gaze and dark, permanent crimson stains, forever trapped underneath her fingernails. Her own flesh and blood uncles, maybe cousins, had tried butchering her. She lost count of the betrayals the night they torched her mother's scripture and tossed her inside the animal shed. They abandoned her there practically lifeless, nursing shattered bones and busted teeth, leaking crimson into straw, completely drenched in foul stable filth. One limb hung totally useless while she gasped for air. This marked the third brutal beating her kin had delivered, except this go-around they fully intended to ensure she never woke up. The gang galloped southward, driving the remaining rustled cattle straight down toward Fort Wallace, assuming the raging snowstorm would complete the fatal job their boots started. She lay motionless until the second evening, when pure starvation finally overpowered her agony. Dragging herself out from under a dead mule, she slurped thawed frost directly off the watering basin's edge. Her mouth split open and wept crimson. With zero provisions, she resorted to gnawing on tough saddlery straps. Come day 6, she finally pushed herself upright, neither towering nor powerful, but upright nonetheless. The homestead lay ransacked, entryways shattered, hearth freezing and looking-glasses smashed into absolute void. She nested inside the underground storage, swaddled in the exact bison pelt her mama had perished underneath. Tears stopped falling. Weeping just wasted vital heat. This acreage was a corpse exhausted and poisoned by the boundless avarice of the McAllister men. Zero hounds or fowl remained, just frozen tracks and misty exhales hanging in the chill. Yet the girl lingered. Where could she run? Bearing only the thoroughly disgraced McAllister surname, her options were non-existent. Maternal relatives were either miles across the frontier or already buried, and frontier justice cared little for malnourished, battered young women offering zero financial prospects. When spring arrived, her locks grew out again. She hacked them short using a hunting blade. She trapped a couple of jackrabbits and figured out how to operate the corroded revolver her mother concealed up the flue. The frontier offered zero pardons, merely observing her, and the hardened girl stared right back. When that emaciated drifter eventually rode onto her property, hobbling atop a skeletal stallion, she had already ended 3 lives. Silent and deadly, the first took a masonry block. Another tasted her mother's revolver, while the last caught a spade right inside a trench he personally excavated. His identity remained a total mystery to her understanding, only that the stranger was leaking crimson and totally adrift. He sported a ragged azure duster, civilian yet ancient enough to have seen battlefields from the great conflict that tore the nation apart. One of his limbs dangled completely uselessly, slouching over his saddle, clinging to awareness with his brim hiding a gaunt visage. His mount halted at the boundary fence, dead in its tracks. The rider froze too. She bided her time until dusk, then advanced with her weapon raised. The stranger never twitched. Only after she jams the cold muzzle directly against his jawline did his eyelids flutter. "You come looking to end things?" she interrogated. "Negative, miss," he wheezed out. "Simply perishing. Appreciate you checking in, though." She scrutinized the wounded drifter for a heavy minute. The man was relatively youthful, perhaps 30 years of age or younger, assuming life had treated him just as brutally. The stranger never recoiled as she dropped her weapon's aim. He remained totally limp as she yanked his weight right off the riding tack and hauled his body toward the stable. She repaired his ruined joint using a sweeper shaft and hard liquor. He shrieked exactly once, biting his mouth until crimson flowed. She allowed it sheer agony ensured absolute truthfulness. Upon finally regaining full consciousness the next dawn, he found her aggressively honing that hunting blade beside the hearth. "What do folks call you?" the stranger inquired. "Nope," he agreed, accepting the grim reality. Name's Jude. Keeping quiet, she simply fetched him a rusted dipper of water. The battered drifter lingered entirely devoid of choice. His broken body effectively trapped him there. Rot tore through his flank, condemning him to a delirious month. The frontier woman Lona sustained him on meager rations, hauled icy river water, and mended his tattered duster. Joy was completely absent from her face. Amusement vanished from her spirit, yet she stubbornly kept the grim reaper at bay. Come day 24, the drifter finally rose. "Earn your keep if you're bunking here," she demanded. "Just passing through," he countered. Without a fuss, she shoved a heavy hatchet into his grip. Side by side, the pair chopped timber till their palms ran red. Silence reigned between them. Chatter wasted precious stamina. A rookie mistake neither of these hardened souls could afford in such an unforgiving territory. When the thaw arrived, the jagged ridges erupted in a momentary rebellion against the grave. Prairie blossoms clawed their way past charred remains and skeletal debris. Scavengers prowled back, bringing danger along. Those McAllister brothers rode in, soaked in cheap liquor and completely busted, hunting for their former acreage like a pack of rabid hounds suffering from amnesia. The homesteaders spotted hoofprints early on, followed by the smoldering camp they had carelessly abandoned near the timber edge. A blatant taunt echoing a sinister message. "We see you out here, little lady." Retreat wasn't an option. She calmly racked her revolver while her companion ground his blade against the whetstone. Darkness brought a trio of outlaws. Lona instantly spotted the ringleader by the jagged facial wound she had previously gifted him. His backup consisted of quiet hired guns, definitely unrelated blood, just ruthless associates of her past attackers. The wounded drifter blocked their path at the boundary wire. "Your claim here is dead," he warned them. The disfigured bandit Hawk spat into the dust. "Doesn't belong to you either, drifter." Stepping from the shadows, the fierce woman raised her repeater. "Walk away alive," she ordered coldly. The intruders simply chuckled. That humor evaporated instantly as a sudden bullet shattered a thug's patella. Moving with blinding speed that surprised even his host, the drifter buried his hatchet deep into a mercenary's shoulder joint. Crimson quickly stained the prairie dirt. Soon, only the disfigured boss stood upright. Panic setting in, he glanced between the pair. "You just standing by while she guns me down?" he stammered. "I don't control her actions," the man replied coldly. "She serves her own kind of justice." The outlaw bolted into the pitch black. She held her fire. Well, for that evening, anyway. By the time the sweltering heat hit, they shared a cabin, though maintaining separate quarters. Faith blossomed slowly in this barren wasteland. Still, every dusk she observed his rhythmic chest rising near the hearth, while he consistently woke at dawn to mend the property lines. The concept of settling down remained unspoken. However, an undeniable bond had secretly forged between them. It wasn't merely about his lingering presence, but the fact he never tried to drive her off. Once the late summer droughts scorched the valley's golden brown, traveling horsemen began circulating a brand new legend about the property across dusty saloons. The former family title was completely forgotten. Locals dubbed the acreage Widow's Hollow. Nobody knew exactly who perished or who survived out there, only that wandering onto those acres meant certain doom. Rumors spoke of a hauntingly eyed female and her grim, unsmiling protector. Bored by stubborn board, the drifter reconstructed the ruined veranda. Meanwhile, his partner snared wild predators, curing their pelts using caustic lie and pure spite. Lacking livestock official insignias or legal government deeds, they maintained their sanctuary through sheer violence, iron willpower, and a silent pact to slaughter anyone attempting to steal it. Yet fresh peril inevitably approached because the frontier consistently tests any perceived vulnerability. Come midday, a lone, towering stranger galloped in, wearing pristine leather and gleaming six-shooters. He offered zero pleasantries, but made no hostile moves either. Resting his weight against the leather pommel, the stranger sounded entirely too corporate for the frontier. "Got documents stating the bank claimed this dirt 12 months back," he announced. "Auctioned off to an Abilene syndicate. My task is mapping the perimeter and ensuring you folks vacate the premises quietly. Lona's gaze remained dead and unblinking. Her fingers drifted to the waiting Winchester. Stepping from the doorway, Jude growled, "This dirt belongs to us." "Things change," the rider countered. "I hold legal deeds plus a tin star pinned inside this jacket. I ain't forcing you out before sundown, but make no mistake, you folks are moving on." The frontier woman scrutinized their visitor, noting the suspicious lack of grime on his knuckles. He eyed her the way a rancher appraises a crippled Mustang, cautious but absolutely confident in his ultimate victory. "Return at dawn," she commanded, without a hint of emotion. Arching an eyebrow, the interloper asked why. "Because I require sufficient daylight to excavate the grave I will put you in otherwise." The firearm stayed put. No sudden gestures happened. The suited rider took his sweet time turning around, but he absolutely retreated. Shifting his attention, Jude looked back over at his companion. The absolute ghost of an amused smirk briefly danced across his weathered features. He was likely spinning tall tales regarding those property papers. "Irrelevant," she countered. And she was entirely right, seeing as the brutal wilderness had already claimed their souls. Come the early autumn winds, a mysterious parcel showed up, lacking any signature or point of origin. Someone had driven an iron spike through a canvas-covered note straight into their threshold overnight. One got away. He is hiding out over in Sweetwater, still sporting his father's jewelry. After absorbing the words twice over, her fingers remained entirely steady while their facial muscles locked absolutely tight. Tending the crackling hearth, Jude observed her intensely. An old acquaintance? Hardly. You realize exactly who this implies. Giving a single nod, she effectively halted any further questions. He simply rose and began prepping their trusted mounts. "Your presence is not strictly required," she offered. Silence remained his only reply. Yet, come the dawn departure, he rode steadfastly alongside her flank. The punishing journey to Sweetwater demanded 48 solid hours of riding steadily toward the southeast, descending into a miserable prospecting camp, utterly suffocated by choking dirt and cheap liquor. Arriving at dusk on day 2, masked heavily by cloth, their mouths tasted sharply of trail grit. Jude secured dismal lodgings directly over the stables, while Lona immediately positioned herself facing the entrance, intensely scanning the street traffic below. Spotting their intended target ultimately proved remarkably simple. Elias McAllister preached exactly like a reverend, but possessed an incredibly explosive hair-trigger fury. He managed a notorious local watering hole featuring a blatantly crooked card setup, utilizing hidden glass alongside a battered hostess who kept her eyes perpetually glued to the floorboards. A sapphire-studded band gleamed rather distinctly directly upon his primary shooting index finger. That exact jewelry belonged to her grandpa right before that vicious gang butchered him to steal his acreage. For 72 hours, she observed from the shadows, meticulously tracking his liquor intake and his sleazy charms, noting when he struck a young worker over simple noise. His malice had not faded, but merely grown incredibly toxic. Jude eagerly volunteered for the hit. "Negative," she declined. "An assassin is not what I currently require. I strictly require an audience." Come evening number 4, she pushed through those swinging doors entirely by herself. The barroom fell dead silent, not from recognition, but strictly due to an undeniable aura of impending doom. She glided across the floorboards exactly like an apparition deeply burdened by earthly vengeance. Elias remained completely oblivious to her true identity during those tense initial moments. It clicked only after she occupied the opposing chair, slamming a family revolver down. "You abandoned me beneath a dead draft animal," she announced. "Ringing any bells whatsoever?" His eyes locked onto her form, profound confusion deeply wrinkling his forehead. The amber liquid shook rather violently within his terrified grip. "That tone sounds awfully familiar," he whispered hoarsely. "You loudly claimed I perished. Colossal mistake." Desperately, his trembling fingers scrambled directly toward his leather holster. A revolver flashed before his fingers even brushed the grip, shattering his knuckles and painting the oak tabletop crimson. The saloon fell dead silent save for panicked shouts. Rising to her feet, she muttered, "Still breathing, friend," before abandoning the agonizing wretch. Her partner waited by the hitching post, steeds saddled. Lingering to check if the sheriff arrived or if the bleeding scoundrel perished wasn't on their agenda. Her business was concluded. Come dawn, they had completely evaporated from that dusty settlement, swallowed by the treacherous ridges. The dangerous journey home passed with barely a whisper, yet that quietness felt comfortably profound, an unspoken kinship resembling a solemn pause during a heartfelt frontier prayer. Arriving at their homestead, a brutal tempest brewed overhead. Torrents pounded the roof while violent gusts threatened to snap ancient pines in two. Leaning against the frame, she observed the distant prairie ignite under jagged, blinding flashes. She abandoned her usual lonely spot near the hearth. Resting next to him, her gaze remained fixed, and her flesh felt freezing, unblinking. "My heart ain't yours," she murmured. "Understood," he softly replied. Regardless, he embraced her tightly. Finally, putting past horrors aside, she surrendered to a desperately needed restful slumber. Her mind stayed peacefully blank. As springtime melted the ice and wildlife returned, she consistently woke pre-dawn. Her dark terrors lessened, yet lingered stubbornly. Those frantic midnight shouts vanished, replaced by jaws clamped so fiercely that her skull throbbed. Her companion spent endless daylight hours outdoors, constructing mysterious wooden barriers across the northern pastures, establishing boundaries despite possessing absolutely zero livestock. He labored fiercely, seemingly demanding payment from the dirt itself. "What's the actual point?" she questioned one afternoon, shielding her eyes from the sun. "Eventually, real folks will replace these lingering spirits." She offered zero resistance, nor a single ounce of assistance. Preferring solitude, she scoured the elevated rocky outcrops, armed heavily, tracking the hidden migratory routes of wild game, uncovering ancient indigenous pathways passed down through secret maternal tales. She understood this unforgiving wilderness intimately, flawlessly, and deeply, sensing every deceptive curve and hidden trap, predicting unseen hazards lurking amidst the tall weeds. Eventually, ominous vultures hovering over a canyon caught her sharp eye. Tracking those scavengers led to shattered wooden wheels, recently destroyed cargo, and pair of lifeless beasts trapped in harnesses. Crimson puddles stained the earth, yet victims were completely missing. Scouting ahead, she discovered a lone survivor, a distance away, dragging himself, a sunburned, fair-haired youth, barely 12 years old. Lips blistered, a mangled limb, awkwardly dragged behind his exhausted frame. Quickly, she dropped to the dirt. The kid scrambled away in terror. "Relax. I bring no harm," she assured. His gaze remained frantically huge, resembling a cornered beast, expecting an executioner behind every single boulder. "Who traveled with you?" The frightened kid stayed completely silent. What caused this wreck? Absolutely zero response. Scooping up the battered child, he wailed briefly before gnawing on her jacket collar to muffle the agony. A heavy scowl crossed her partner's face as they approached. "Taking in wandering orphans these days?" he gruffly inquired. "He didn't choose this fate, and honestly, me neither," she fired back. Together, they bandaged the broken bones. For 3 entire sunrises, the child remained mute, refusing meals unless his rescuer stayed squarely by his cot. Hovering near the doorway, the hardened rancher observed suspiciously, internally debating if this new burden was truly worth saving. Once the traumatized survivor finally opened his mouth, the kid's voice barely scratched the absolute silence. "Emmett." She gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Who did this to you, Emmett?" "Ambushed our rig. Drifters in Confederate gray ripped a gold crown right out of my pa's jaw, put a bullet in his neck." Lona's gaze drifted toward the desolate horizon. "I'm well acquainted with that savage breed." The kid nodded, carrying a grim, ancient wisdom. "I took a blade to one of them," he muttered. Jude lowered himself to the dirt, his voice steady. "You drew breath today. That's a victory. Leave the rest to the buzzards. Time bled into weeks, and the runaway dug his heels in. Frontier life had hardened the boy. He practically worshipped Lona, despite her doing absolutely zero to court his favor. He'd hone her hunting knives unprompted, and mend the chicken wire whenever predators breached the coop. Even the notoriously guarded Jude eventually showed the boy how to secure a lariat and carve hickory without slicing a finger off. Ghosts of their violent past remained securely locked away. Nobody mentioned bloodlines, yet their shared quiet forged an unspoken, unbreakable kinship. That fragile peace shattered the evening a lone female drifter rode into camp. Twilight brought a shadow atop a pitch-black mount, impeccably clean boots, staring them down with zero hesitation. You could tell by her posture she learned the hard way that mercy on the frontier always carries a heavy price tag. Bypassing pleasantries entirely, she halted her beast right at the cabin steps and tipped her chin. "Hunting a specific lady," she announced. "Rumor says she put lead into Elias McAllister's, shooting fingers and torched his whiskey joint to ash 48 hours after the fact." Jude casually propped his hand near his holster. "You wearing a tin badge?" "Something far more lethal." Lona emerged from the shadows. "Search is over." The stranger's eyes weighed her heavily. "He's in the ground." Elias botched a suicide with his offhand. Nerves were absolutely shot. Couldn't even grip a liquor glass without spilling it. "I never set that fire," Lona countered. The rider smirked. "Never claimed it was your matches." Crossing her arms tight, Lona demanded her true motive. The shadowy figure swung down from her saddle. "Because lone wolves with your reputation end up as buzzard food mighty fast out here. Plus, you've got a $200 target painted on your back, official state coin, breathing, or in a pine box." Jude's muscles immediately coiled tight. Who's financing that assassination contract? Wealthy Texas barons, the type who believe McAllister's dirt belongs to their family tree by divine right. Lona's expression turned to stone. "So we've got heavy company on the horizon. It's only a matter of time." "And your angle in all this?" She pressed the drifter. The woman held an unblinking stare. "I'm assembling a highly specialized syndicate, a refuge for lethal, discarded women, carrying deep regrets and absolutely nowhere else to hide. You fit the profile." Jude aggressively blocked the path. "She's staying right here." A razor-sharp look from Lona froze Jude in his tracks. She pivoted back to the stranger. "Who exactly am I speaking to?" "Call me May. I'm declining your invitation. Never extended one. Merely dropping a survival tip. Linger in this territory, and you'll be swallowed alive by bounty hunters itching to cash in your skeleton." With fluid grace, the phantom rider vaulted back atop her massive beast. Should survival suddenly sound appealing, ride north of Elkstone and track down the widow's post. We refuse to flee. We bend the knee to absolutely no one, and our justice is painfully efficient. She spurred the stallion into the dark. Jude kept his eyes locked until the trail dust completely settled. "That woman is a walking catastrophe," Jude muttered. "Every living soul is Lona," fired back. Yet when midnight struck, she was wide awake, fingers wrapped around her heavy revolver, haunted by ghosts, not cowardice. May's parting words echoed through the cabin like a solitary church bell, signaling an impending, violent reckoning. The frost held off initially, yet its eventual arrival proved brutally dark and absolutely merciless. Scavengers wailed across the peaks while Emmett rigged snares. She guided his blade, demonstrating how to flawlessly peel hides. Jude lost his final decent footwear to the solid ice, yet they survived. They always endured it. Yet occasionally, a distant silhouette haunted the ridge. A solitary, lingering horseman, maintaining a highly sinister, watchful distance. A sudden optic flash, the faint grind of leather against rock. Her enemies remained nearby, while the wild frontier silently held its breath. Come the thaw, fresh crimson stained the slush behind their shed. Their hound perished, initially viciously butchered and hollowed out outside. Next came the boy's frantic footprints sprinting through the ravine, ending when he stumbled indoors, gasping. Completely pale, muttering about spotting at least 4 armed strangers, lurking just inside the timber. Without hesitating, Jude threw the deadbolt. She gently placed her Winchester onto the boards. Silence ruled the room. They were certainly no strangers to grim reapers stalking the woods. Yet this specific standoff felt like their borrowed time had finally and completely run out. Evening fell without a single hearth flame or warm, cooked meal. They simply huddled against the timber frames with guns drawn, tracking every phantom movement outside the glass panes. The kid gripped a small axe, fingers trembling violently. She let him stay awake on night guard. Morning broke to a booming holler demanding the matriarch. The stranger's drawl echoed, deliberately claiming they were seeking an honorable resolution. Marching onto the deck, the biting morning chill hit her instantly. 5 hired guns lined the perimeter mounts, anchored and repeating rifles slung casually. Every single one sported heavy slickers, several displaying ash-colored bicep bands. Whacking official stars, they carried the arrogant swagger of thugs, completely accustomed to obedience. A fresh-faced youth took the lead jacket pushed back, revealing a weathered six-shooter. He aggressively spat out an accusation regarding stolen territory. He listed her sins: murdering Elos, torching the estate, terrifying his betters. Yet she remained totally stone-faced. She coolly declared her victims earned their terror, prompting a wicked, mocking grin. He bragged about holding legal paperwork transferring their homestead over to a massive corporate syndicate. Promising a midday takeover, he watched Jude move up right alongside her. Jude dared to ask if their syndicate could bleed. The thug smugly confirmed occasional bloodshed. Pivoting with unsettling church-like manners, the young gunfighter strolled toward his saddle. Lacking explicit ultimatums, the true countdown to a brutal massacre silently commenced inside. Under darkness, they rigged the dirt using jagged shrapnel packed inside tins. Concealed cords wove through the brush alongside hidden spikes designed for shattering legs. Inside the cabin walls were heavily fortified, using highly volatile fuel explosives. The boy claimed the rafters peering through his .22 caliber optic with a newfound, remarkably chilling calm. Operating with deadly fluid precision, the matriarch started breaking down her primary weapon. Oiling mechanisms while muttering ancient, forgotten prayers passed down directly from her ancestors. She quietly vowed the earth itself had claimed her and would instantly entomb their attackers. Jude kept absolutely silent until daybreak brought deafening gunfire. The assault was a chaotic, lightning-fast charge, screaming mercenaries galloping hard, brandishing blazing firebrands. Her opening trigger pull instantly neutralized a vanguard thug before flames spread. The corpse tumbled violently, crushed entirely beneath his partner's charging mount. From the upper stables, Jude unleashed hell through a sniper hole, prepped precisely for this exact nightmare. That first bullet ripped straight into the primary attacker's gut, dropping him silently to the dirt. His remaining crew scrambled for cover, remaining dangerously close. Lead peppered the homestead's deck, tearing apart timber and blowing out the glass panes. Up top, our boy squeezed the trigger 2 times, catching flesh. A sudden shriek cut off into nothingness. Gray plumes started billowing out of the dead weeds just past the chicken wire. Snatching up the lamp oil, the tough frontier woman dashed against the breeze, desperate to choke out the encroaching flames. Nature's gales granted them a slight mercy right before that sinister drawl echoed across the yard. "You should have taken the money and rode off, little lady. But you picked a slaughter instead." Staying completely mute, she hunkered down low by the horse basin, biding her time. A pair of dusty spurs crept forward with a lowered repeater until she popped up and unloaded a double tap. The outlaw collapsed with a ruined windpipe, spilling hot crimson all over the prairie floor. Over her shoulder, the stable roof erupted into a fiery blaze, pulling a harsh swear from her partner. Sprinting his way, she spotted the wounded man hobbling toward the inferno, hauling a soaked quilt over his shoulders. Working as a unit, they smothered the furious inferno until the embers finally suffocated themselves. However, that massive distraction burned up precious seconds, allowing the final ambusher to flank them from the rear, sneaking around with dead, quiet steps. The youngster spotted the threat early, only for his .22 caliber rifle to lock up entirely. Booting the back entrance right off its hinges, the intruder stepped inside with a drawn revolver. While the older man pivoted far too sluggishly, our heroine reacted instantly. Hurling her carving blade in pure panic, the unguided steel magically found the killer's neck. It barely grazed him, yet the shock sent the scoundrel reeling backward. Charging in, her companion swung a splintered furniture spindle, bashing the intruder 3 times, followed by 2 additional strikes, delivering one final blow just for the kid's sake, leaving nothing behind but harsh, gasping wheezes. Their veranda was completely bowed, with the cabin exterior absolutely peppered with bullet holes. The animal pen still smoldered, yet somehow the trio had survived the slaughter. Later that evening, the youngest broke the quiet, claiming he would have ended the attacker had his weapon functioned. "You locked up in pure terror," the veteran bluntly corrected. The kid shrank back until the fierce woman reassured him that he never ran away. Sticking around matters most, they concluded, quietly dining on cured meat, stale biscuits, and kettle-heated creek water. Hours passed before the old-timer produced a wrapped rag, unpeeling it with heavy hands. Resting within lay a battered military badge, an ancient horseman's emblem, stripped of its shine. "Pin this to my chest before the grand conflict turned bloody," he muttered softly. Offering the medal to the lad, he asked if he wanted it, which the young survivor accepted like a sacred relic. Observing this quiet exchange, the matriarch shifted her stare toward the jagged horizon. They had earned a victory today, perhaps lacking total safety, but gaining breathing room and a solid chance. Still harboring deep suspicions, she nonetheless stepped onto the dirt empty-handed for the first occasion since the ambush. Above them hung a freezing, perfectly round lunar sphere, silently judging the plains. Gazing into the night sky, she finally let out a long, exhausted sigh. By July, the scorching earth cracked wild horses' feet and ruined timber, while vultures slowly patrolled the thermals above. Meanwhile, their local riverbed nearly dried up, bleeding out like a wounded animal. Days bled into weeks, with absolutely 0 visitors crossing their property line. 0 strangers on horseback and 0 mail brought a deeply unsettling quiet to the frontier. Her paranoia refused to fade, whereas her companion started constructing new projects, abandoning barrier repairs entirely. He started carving out a mystery item using the charred timber from their ruined stable, relentlessly hacking away under the brutal heat wave, leaving her guessing if he was crafting a supper stand or a burial box. Emmett became gaunt and vicious. Gunfire ceased rattling his nerves, and strolling through exposed plains stopped triggering anxious backward glances. Yet a gentle core stubbornly survived within him. Lona caught glimpses whenever he nursed crippled poultry or patched up bleeding baby deer discovered deep within canyon crevices, an unextinguished compassion refusing to die. She constantly questioned its expiration date in this wasteland. Dawn broke, Jude planted like an oak tree right by their pasture's boundary, gazing intensely eastward. 3 approaching horsemen carried an entirely unfamiliar aura. Minus the usual trench coats or drawn weapons, these relaxed silhouettes guided a wagon with loose tethers. May rode alongside, slipping from her saddle in absolute silence. Their locked eyes mirrored clashing steel underneath the blistering glare. May finally whispered about their ongoing pursuit. Torrance's paid thugs had already incinerated 2 settlements, lynched a lawman, and vanished another since April. Heading downward, those outlaws whisper, "Your reputation cautiously," though the immediate trail has frozen over. Total silence. New targets. Stepping off the veranda, Lona demanded their purpose, prompting whispers regarding a hidden allied sanctuary. Squinting suspiciously, she reminded them regarding their supposed secure hideout for grieving wives. May scanned the property, revealing their refuge was completely reduced to ash 21 days ago, without survivors. Jude remained perfectly still, stating with chilling certainty that enemies would target this homestead next. May agreed, while Lona hesitantly suggested barricading themselves inside. May fiercely retorted that playing defense wasn't enough. Total eradication was their ultimate goal. Marching onward, she peeled back the wagon's tarp, exposing 3 elongated wooden boxes hidden underneath, displaying exposed scatterguns, long barrels, and explosive dust, alongside sinister, tightly wrapped explosive bundles. She passionately demanded absolute finality. May's voice burned with conviction, while Jude inspected the armory before eyeing his companion. Her pregnant pause shattered, firmly decreeing Emmett stays securely behind. He avoids this blazing crusade entirely, a condition May solemnly acknowledged with a slow bow. Talk of constructing a future paradise afterward was swiftly dismissed by a grim refusal. "Construct whatever you desire, but my return isn't happening," prompting her guest's surprised expression. Asked if this vendetta concluded with her impending death, she gritted her teeth in reckless apathy. 72 hours passed before they galloped away, accompanied only by May's most vicious female warriors. Crow and Ladder, deeply traumatized veterans, harboring chillingly emotionless approaches toward taking human lives. That enemy stronghold sat directly below Bridge Hollow. This former transit hub became an impenetrable citadel, shielded by mercenaries and government corruption. Facing over 30 guards, our crew skipped the stealth approach, marching forward like arriving reapers, taking the absolute lead, carrying ancestral steel holstered low alongside a slung long gun draped in a maternal heirloom blanket from one tragic evening. Woven heavily with crimson fabric and ancient spiritual blessings. That initial crack of lead originated entirely from the opposing faction's barricades. Their side delivered the final blast. Flames consumed everything for 72 hours, launching suffocating obsidian plumes skyward that completely erased the night sky. Structures crumbled entirely, while livestock stampeded free, and oil-soaked accounting ledgers burned entirely, costing May 2 companions. A pierced lung couldn't stop Crow from advancing until she ruthlessly crushed the agonizingly defeated overseer. Silencing 5 guards using blades and garrots, Jude cleared the courtyard for Lona's personal ultimate execution. Her target never fled. The man offered no resistance. He just sat amidst his gleaming repeaters, fixated on a faded portrait of his kin. "Ain't never crossed paths," he murmured evenly. "Consider us acquainted," she whispered. A single round shattered his windpipe before she drifted outside, leaving the manor to the creeping, hungry flames. Riding back into camp, the canyon breeze felt completely altered. This wasn't mere quiet. It was true serenity, the heavy sort, purchased solely through absolute devastation. Emmett rushed forward, his gaze stretching at the sight of crimson and ash, yet he kept his jaw shut. The boy silently gripped Jude by the sleeve, dragging him toward the water basin to scrub away the grit. "Lingard," she finally announced. "We ride for the northern pastures. Rumor has it there's unclaimed dirt past the abandoned silver claims. No cattle barons left to steal it." Lona gave a firm nod. Lingard studied her weathered face endlessly. "Absolutely positive? I'm entirely done digging graves. Time we planted roots instead of bodies," Lona muttered. Lingard briefly tapped her shoulder, just a fleeting touch before saddling his Mustang and heading outward. Jude lingered by the cabin steps. "She makes sense. You could run this whole valley." "I ain't no boss," Lona fired back. "I just need the trembling earth to finally settle." Jude dipped his hat. "I can stick around," he offered. Lona stared back. For the initial time that winter, her lips curled. Subtle, weary, yet entirely sufficient. "You already are." Decades down the line, locals dubbed it Whispering Gulch. No bleeding widow tales, no rich barren estates, merely tranquil. A secluded basin where violent prairie tempests perished, a refuge where a woman emerged from slaughter soundlessly, seeking neither crowns nor pulpits, just aiming to sow a crop immune to wildfire and build a legacy of chosen family strong enough to outlast the frontier itself.